Okay. Hayden Ludwig joins me right now. He's a big brain and investigative researcher at Capital Research Center, which is, Hayden, I guess what you would say this is an investigative think tank in Washington, D.C. What's sort of the point of view of Capital Research Center? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, hi, Bill. Glad to be on.
Glad to have you here,
Capital
too.
Research. Yeah, thank you. Capital Research Center is really America's investigative think tank. So we're pretty unique in the world of D.C. think tanks in that we basically try to expose the left. We look at the ties between activist groups, influencers, big funders, all those different groups. So if you can think of them, we probably have worked on them before.
It is such a target-rich environment these days, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. It certainly is. Always have a job.
Okay, I imagine so. And so it's more than just a bunch of people with big degrees sitting around and thinking about, well, here's policy papers. And not that there's anything wrong with thinking about policy papers, but it really is about digging into the fingers of corruption. And I can't help but think that when we're looking at this whole Twitter over Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Green Deal and the Green New Deal, and how many Democrats, many prominent people who I would think of maybe wrong, but I don't think of them as stupid, but just automatically signing on to the agreement like lemmings. I'm wondering if you could help us understand what is driving this and what is the real push of the Green New Deal. Maybe give us your insight. You have written about that. In fact, you had an article, a few weeks back, Sunrise Movement won't let the sun go down on the Green New Deal.
Yeah, Sunrise Movement is one of the activist groups really pushing this Green New Deal. And, the way I would put it, I think the Green New Deal is just the latest eco-fad. It's really just classic anti-capitalism. And to your point about everybody staking out positions, this is more of a rallying cry for the radical left to, again, stake out their position. This is what we stand for. This is the new litmus test. Than it is a serious policy proposal, although it should be taken very seriously because it provides a lot of insight into the minds of how a lot of these environmentalist groups and activists think.
I find it interesting that we had all sorts of media people that were saying, oh, she did not call for the elimination of cows, or she did not call for the elimination of airline travel, but yet it was really in there. It was in the original versions of it, which were scrubbed from the web. Well, at least a scrub from her website, as it were. That kind of tells you this line of thinking of where they want to go.
It really does. The really weird thing about the Green New Deal is that there really is no one Green New Deal. There's probably 3 or 4 or 5 or who knows how many. The Green Party, for instance, which is always on the far left of these issues, has been pushing this thing for years. And if you read their website, they take it to the nth degree, and they're not ashamed to say they want 100% renewable energy in 11 years. Well, good luck with that. They want to electrify all vehicles, so say goodbye to your car. And they're the groups who are totally for virtually abolishing airplanes because they think that light rail is going to take over the entire American economy. We're all going to get around on a train one day.
All right. And so we naturally have the generating capacity to take care of this. You notice that the part that they never seem to talk about in the Green New Deal, with everybody driving an electric car, I don't think most people don't realize that once it gets cold, electric cars work like crap. Truth be, I mean, when it comes right down, you can't charge the battery unless it's above freezing. And even when you do charge the battery, it takes a super, super, super long time to do it. And then when you start using things like heaters and seat warmers and defrosters on a green car, all of a sudden your 90 or a 100 mile becomes 30 or 40 miles of range. You notice that none of that gets talked about.
Yeah, so you just take a bike to work at that point, I think, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, and part of the problem is, where does all that electricity come to charge your car, right? About 88% or so of U.S. energy in 2017 was produced by nuclear or carbon sources. That's natural gas and oil primarily. And it's just about 15% that came from the things they always push, hydropower, wind, and solar.
Is there any place in the world which is surviving, other than an off-the-grid cabin, let's say, is there any country that truly has 100% renewable the way that the Ocasio-Cortezes and fellow travelers would like? Is anybody doing it?
Not to my knowledge. Europe is always the one that loves to push how renewable and clean they really are. Ironically, a lot of the growth in Europe's renewables has come from burning wood. A lot of that has been shipped in little pellets from North America. And of course, wood releases 4 times as much CO2 per megawatt hour of electricity as natural gas. So they're actually increasing their carbon output by burning more wood than anything else, even though they get to claim that it's renewable.
What part of the Green New Deal may make the most sense? So I want to try to be, not that I necessarily want you arguing against common sense, but is there anything in there that actually makes sense of what's been proposed so far?
Well, I suppose if you think that free college and trade school for everybody or retrofitting every building in America in 11 years is a really good idea, or my personal favorite, cutting the military budget in half, if you think those are really good ideas, then I suppose you think it's a really good thing. It's really hard to defend the Green New Deal because it's exactly what you were talking about earlier, that this is classic anti-capitalism. It's the rallying cry position. Maybe they come out with a more reasonable approach down the road. Maybe this is just a way to get attention in the meantime. But no, I wouldn't say that there's anything very reasonable about the Green New Deal.
Hayden Ludwig once again, and he is with the Capital Research Center, America's investigative think tank, capitalresearch.org. I can't help but think that really what this is about, where you see this wanting to go, is more of an implementation of technocracy too, because it sounds to me that everything is electrified, everything is monitored. Isn't that also part of this push for this so-called sustainable future?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that you always, when you're talking about these kinds of transformations, you always hear these phrases of, tens of millions of people have been turned into climate refugees. That's from the Green Party's website. Mm-hmm. These dire calls. My personal favorite from all this is that we need to mobilize every aspect of American society at a scale not seen since World War II. This is a total war mentality like in World War II, except this time the target is the United States, its own people, not an enemy, an aggressor.
So the Green New Deal is a war against the United States.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, their own website admits that this could cost between $700 billion all the way up to $1 trillion. That's actually the conservative estimate from the Green Party itself.
That seems to be it reminds me very much of that definition of treason in the Constitution, making war upon these United States. I wonder if anyone could bring that up to AOC.
I'd love to see that. But, other proposals have had it as high as $7 trillion, some at $13 trillion. So really, where do you stop? How much do you want to rebuild? How much do you want to fundamentally transform the United States?
Well, Obama wanted to fundamentally transform the United States. This looks like it would be continuing that job. And I remember how he said that our energy bills would have to needfully triple. Electricity prices would have to triple in order to make this happen. Wow, this is really something, Hayden. And I know a lot of people just want to laugh and make fun of her. But I look at AOC's plan, this Green New Deal, as a stalking horse in which you shove it so far to the radical left and everyone, you can't do that. And then everybody comes back with something that sounds a little more reasonable. And so we're going to just swallow that hook, line, and sinker. And yet we continue to ratchet it more and more and more to that crazy point of view and the anti-capitalist view of the world.
Oh, that's absolutely correct. This is always the way it is, right? I mean, take them at their word that, I don't expect to see. Currently, the Green New Deal is a House resolution, so it doesn't actually carry any teeth if it passes the House, which it probably will, although we don't know that. But take them at their word that these people mean business when they say they want a complete transformation of the economy, the country, society, etc. Environmentalism is always predicated on a complete rejection of America's past, not a retooling, a complete rejection.
Hayden, could you tell us a little bit more about this connection with the Sunrise Movement and this AOC Green New Deal? You broke that down.
Yeah, so sure. Sunrise Movement is a group that you may have seen some pictures of. They're pretty obscure, but there's a group of millennials who showed up in AOC's office. They were actually protesting Speaker Pelosi's office back in then almost Speaker Pelosi's office in December. And these guys were the ones who were initially pushing the Green New Deal. It wasn't really clear where they came from. Mm-hmm. We did a little digging at Capital Research Center. We found out that they're closely tied to a group called U.S. Climate Plan. This is just one of the many green groups that's pushing some version of a carbon trading scheme like cap and trade or a carbon tax.
And that's what they're working on here in the Oregon State Legislature right now. They're pushing
exactly
this.
Right.
And there's already talk from Northwest Natural Gas that by the time this would be fully implemented in a few years, that every resident on Northwest Natural Gas would be paying $600 more per year to heat their home. It's like another $50 a month. I mean, that's real money for most anybody.
Oh, I completely believe it. Look, they did a cap and trade in California, and actually, interestingly enough, I've read that Oregon supporters have compared it glowingly to the California cap and trade system, and the results there are, they're charging it's an additional 11 cents per gallon added to Californians' gas, which is already, I can speak from experience, very high. They think it could rise to 20 cents per gallon by 2030. Companies have already spent about $5 billion at these cap and trade auctions. That's just all needless expense created by the state to pursue its energy policies that, frankly, they don't work.
So this whole idea that this is a market for carbon credits, it's not really a market. It is a government-mandated market. We're going to say that you can only emit this if you purchase these credits, almost like purchasing indulgences in the Catholic Church for sinning. I think it's almost what it's about, isn't it?
There is a little bit of a religious element, yeah, but that's the thing about cap and trade. It's always sold as the supposedly market-friendly solution to climate change, as opposed to just mandating everybody change now, immediately, tomorrow. The way it works is it puts a cap on maximum greenhouse gases. That's mostly carbon dioxide emissions that are allowed each year. And it targets these different emitting entities. That's mostly power plants or factories, refineries, those sorts of things. And it grants, like you said, indulgences. They call them allowances, a number of emission allowances every year to these emitters. And every year the government, in this case California, and hopefully not, but Oregon in the future, auctions off more allowances every year. Then they lower that cap annually. So the idea is they can claim it's market-friendly because instead of mandating everybody lower their CO2 emissions now, they give you a span of years. In this case, I think it's about 11 years, to go ahead and start reducing these things. But that comes at incredible cost.
So if you have everybody reducing their carbon dioxide emissions, carbon dioxide is a normal part of life itself on planet Earth. We emit carbon dioxide. The plant in the room absorbs the carbon dioxide and then creates oxygen. Now, I suppose, what are we producing too much carbon dioxide according to the research for the plants to be able to absorb or to be able to use at some point? I'm really trying to find an answer on this because there seems to be such a faith-based situation out there that says that, well, carbon dioxide levels are higher. They're not as high as they've been in the past year, and it's getting warmer. So, well, obviously the two are connected is how it's being presented out there. Yeah, well, that's the thing is this really is more of a faith-based thing. That's what you know that when you hear them talk about on the left, we need scientific consensus. Consensus has never been the goal of science, right? The truth and digging up the facts has always been the goal of science. And so, look, I mean, half of the deal with renewables, I mentioned it earlier, a lot of Europe is gloating over its growth in renewable energy sources. The problem is, if that's coming from burning wood, that means you're chopping down trees. Well, trees are a huge carbon dioxide sink. So even if you feel very strongly that global warming is a real thing and that that's happening, the truth is the groups that are pushing renewables the most are the ones who are pushing the thing that's actually going to exacerbate the problem by tearing down whole forests. Where is the money coming from for it? Because you talk about the Sunrise Board of Directors there, Michael Dorsey and so many others. Follow the money. Yeah, it's a little bit unclear where these come from. I know that we've dug up key groups in Oregon that are pushing this current legislative concept. 350.org, which is Bill McKibben's group. This is not the typical mainstream left, right? This is a far left organization that truly is on the extreme edge of the green movement. And a more obscure one called Renew Oregon. Mm-hmm. We did some digging. These guys are a 501c4 advocacy group, which effectively means that they can do a lot of lobbying. Looking at the money that they've paid out in 2016, they gave some money to Governor Kate Brown's PAC. They've given money to the Sierra Club and to the Oregon League of Conservation Voters. It turns out that their board members actually consist of people from the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, a group called the Environmental Council, and another one called Climate Solutions. So their own coalition they brag about consists of NRDC, even AFSCME, the big national union. So these guys are well connected. All right. This is more than just George Soros wanting to burp out a few bucks here and there. I'm just kind of wondering, are there Are there big corporate donors? And what I suspect here, this is my suspicion, that many of the companies that hope to profit from a green revolution would be funding some of these more radical groups. Is there any evidence of anything like that to your...
Well, I don't see any evidence of direct grants from for-profit corporations. That's totally possible. Wouldn't be the first time. Instead, what you tend to see with groups like this, we've uncovered many things like this, is you see them giving tacit support to these supposedly eco-friendly ideas. We call it greenwashing, right? It's a way of covering themselves so they look like they're on board, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. And really what it is it's an invitation to cronyism. You actually saw this a lot in the original New Deal that the Green New Deal wants to model itself off of FDR's old 1930s proposal. That involved a lot of price fixing, a lot of price controls. Well, price controls meant that big government and big business colluded so that everybody got their favorite deal. And guess who paid the price for that one? It was people in the middle, small business and taxpayers.
And, of course, we've seen a more recent version of cronyism with the electric vehicle tax subsidies, in which people who don't drive expensive electric vehicles are forced to pay higher taxes so that, ecologically conscious, if you want to term them that, limousine liberals are able to have their Tesla. And it seems like a really strange way to run the railroad.
Well, renewables are highly, highly inefficient. The irony is that the left tends to push these things like they are new and innovative, but come on, wind power's been around for thousands of years, since the Babylonians, right? Solar power was introduced in the 1800s, right? So these things have been around a long time. Why have we never used them in large quantities? Because they're not very efficient ways of running a grid. That's why, if you go back even to the 1920s and 1930s, it was understood by radical environmentalists back then, if you want to build these things, you have to push the government to pay for them, because business is not going to make that investment because it's a poor investment by itself. Hence, groups like Solyndra, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, Oregon knows all about that. It's interesting how you think about it. I grew up in Milan, Ohio, is where I spent a lot of my youth. And Thomas Edison was, the inventor of the light bulb, the most practical light bulb. Was born there. He's an amazing inventor. Not a particularly nice man from what I could tell. But he and Henry Ford were best of buddies back in the day. And Edison built battery-powered cars, electric car, a green car, I suppose, before that you could have a green car. And then he ended up, looking at what was going on with Henry Ford's mobile. He says, "Young man, you've got it." That's it, because he even realized that what his vehicle was impractical for long-distance travel. Well, the Model T was not. And that's what never gets talked about, the length of recharging these vehicles and the impracticality for using them in cold weather, for going long distances and all these other issues. And I'm just really concerned when you see a bunch of people who I think are kind of know-nothings are pushing this idyllic future that has no evidence supporting it.
Well, it really does sound really nice. There's something clean about wind turbines and solar panels, right? It sounds really nice. In reality,
well, unless you're a migratory bird getting chopped up by the 200-mile-per-hour blade coming at you.
And the fact that groups like Sierra Club support these sorts of things shows you how selective they are about, their animal rights things that they push. So it's always a give and take, and they're the first ones to understand that. But, solar panels, these things have kind of reached their theoretical maximums for what we can do. Where we are right now, would require a huge miracle breakthrough in technology to make these things viable for running a grid, right? Solar panels, they talk about, they can only generate energy at about 60% capacity for just about 5 hours a day, depending on the season. Well, you can't run a grid that requires a 100% power input constantly. Think about your computer. If your computer gets less than 100% of the necessary power, it doesn't just operate slower, it shuts off.
It shuts off, right? Yeah, exactly.
That's how the entire American grid runs. So if you tried to transfer this whole grid to solar panels and wind turbines and these sorts of things, you'd end up actually having all sorts of massive rolling blackouts.
We would be a third world country in which they talk about, at certain times of day, they just shut the power off. That's what they need the smart meters for, I'm thinking here, Hayden, but it's another conversation.
Yeah, that's right. They want to live in Cairo, apparently, because that's exactly what happens there.
Yeah, there's only so much capacity. Now, there could be a day when we end up getting to the point where there are amazing advances in energy storage. We don't have that right now. And still, what you see trying to store green power, for the most part, is still the equivalent of making super huge, super expensive versions of laptop batteries, lithium-ion batteries, to supplement the grid. But that would be very expensive too, would it not?
It absolutely would. I think Tesla is a great example of this. Tesla is one of the leading battery technology companies right now to run their cars. How did they get there? I mean, it's an incredible technology. They got there with a lot of government subsidies. Keep this in mind. Why is the Green New Deal being pushed as a major piece of legislation when they always talk about that this is the inevitable future? Well, if it's so inevitable, then why do you need to push it through a massive social transformation now? Because they know that unless they get the federal government to pony up billions, maybe trillions of dollars over years, that they're never going to get these supposed breakthroughs. They may not even get them then. But understand it always is a top-down thing. It's never reliant on the market. It's actually counter to the market.
Sunrise Movement won't let the sun go down on the Green New Deal. That's one of the latest pieces from Hayden Ludwig. Great thinking going on over at Capital Research Center. And there are many other staff members on that are looking into all of these shadowy connections between the green, the left, and various other bits of corruption seeming to festoon the system. So you can laugh at AOC, but I take her seriously, and I take that movement seriously. I think you just laugh at it and ignore it at your peril. Would you agree? I'll give you the final word on that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, mandating 100% renewable energy sources like wind and solar would just cripple America's electrical grid. This is why I say it's just the latest eco-fad. This is just the left's way to get all of its fantasies crammed in at once. But take them seriously. This is the future that they want to carve out, and I don't expect to see them back down from that anytime soon.
All right, Hayden, thank you so much for being on the show. We hope to have you back. Good to hear your thinking. Okay? You be well.
Thanks, Bill. Take care.